Picture this. You're a captured enemy warrior in 9th century Scandinavia, and the last thing you see is a Viking chieftain approaching with a razor-sharp axe and a ritualistic smile. What happens next is so horrifically brutal that even hardened medieval chroniclers could barely describe it. The Vikings called it the Blood Eagle, and it represents the most sadistic execution method ever devised by human minds. Before diving into this forgotten story of ritualistic cruelty, if you enjoy discovering the darkest truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. Please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about humanity's darkest chapters. To understand how the most feared warriors of medieval Europe could create such an unthinkable form of execution, we must first journey into the heart of Viking culture itself. The Norse people weren't just raiders and traders. They were a civilization built on honor, violence, and an unshakable belief that death in battle was the only path to their warrior paradise, Valhalla. In Viking society, honor was worth more than life itself. A man who died bravely in battle would feast forever in Odin's great hall, while those who died peacefully in their beds faced an eternity of shame in the cold realm of hell. This obsession with honor created a culture where extreme violence wasn't just accepted, it was demanded by their gods. The Vikings worshipped a pantheon of war gods who demanded blood sacrifice and glorified violence as religious duty. Odin, the All-Father, was known to hang himself from the world tree for 9 days, pierced by his own spear, to gain wisdom through suffering. If their chief god willingly endured such torment, what did that say about how they should treat their enemies? The Blood Eagle wasn't a common execution method used on ordinary criminals. This was reserved for the most hated enemies, kings who had wronged Viking leaders, traitors who had betrayed sacred oaths, or rival chieftains who had committed unforgivable acts of dishonor. It was both execution and religious sacrifice, designed to send a victim's soul to their gods while demonstrating the power of Viking justice. The earliest accounts of the Blood Eagle appear in the Norse sagas, written centuries later but claiming to describe events from the 9th and 10th centuries. The most famous victim was allegedly King Aelle of Northumbria, who had killed the Viking leader Ragnar Lothbrok by throwing him into a pit of venomous snakes. Ragnar's sons swore a terrible oath of revenge that would be fulfilled in the most horrific way imaginable. A Blood Eagle wasn't a spontaneous act of violence, it was a carefully planned ritual that could take days to prepare. The victim would be captured alive and kept in peak physical condition because the ceremony required them to survive the initial stages. Viking shamans would consult the runes, priests would purify the execution site, and the community would gather to witness what they believed was a sacred offering to their gods. Before the physical torture even began, victims endured days of psychological torment. They were forced to watch the preparations, to see the axes being sharpened, to hear detailed descriptions of what awaited them. Viking warriors would describe each step of the process, explaining how their ribs would be broken, how their lungs would be removed, how long they might remain conscious during the ordeal. The Blood Eagle was typically performed at sacred sites, ancient groves dedicated to Odin, stone circles where the gods were believed to dwell, or specially prepared areas within the great halls where the entire community could witness the sacrifice. The location was as important as the act itself, because this wasn't just execution. It was communication with the divine through human suffering. The Blood Eagle began with the victim positioned face down, often bound to a sacrificial stone or wooden frame. The executioner, usually a high-ranking warrior or religious leader, would make the first incision along the spine using a razor-sharp seax or specialized ritual knife. This initial cut had to be precise, deep enough to access the ribs, but careful not to damage vital organs that would cause immediate death. Once the back was opened, the real torture began. Using axes, hammers, or specialized tools, the executioner would systematically break each rib where it connected to the spine. This wasn't random violence. Each rib had to be broken at precisely the right point to allow removal without immediately killing the victim. The sound of breaking bone would echo through the sacred grove as the victim's screams provided a soundtrack to this religious ceremony. Modern medical experts studying historical accounts of the blood eagle have concluded that the procedure, if performed correctly, could indeed keep a victim alive and conscious for extended periods. The human body's redundant systems and the careful avoidance of major blood vessels would allow someone to survive the initial stages while experiencing unimaginable pain from the systematic destruction of their skeletal structure. After all the ribs were broken and spread outward, the executioner would reach into the chest cavity and carefully extract the victim's lungs. This required incredible precision. The lungs had to be removed intact and without damaging the major blood vessels that would cause immediate death. The goal was to pull the lungs out through the broken ribs and spread them across the victim's back like the wings of an eagle. The wing-like arrangement of the extracted lungs wasn't random. It held deep religious significance for the Vikings. The eagle was sacred to Odin, and by arranging their enemies' lungs like eagle wings, they were offering the victim's life force directly to their chief god. In their minds, they weren't just executing an enemy. They were performing a divine sacrifice that would earn Odin's favor in future battles. Historical accounts suggest that victims of the blood eagle could remain conscious for anywhere from minutes to several hours, depending on the executioner's skill and the victim's physical condition. During this time, they would experience not only the unimaginable physical pain, but also the psychological horror of watching their own lungs arranged like wings across their back while they slowly died from blood loss and organ failure. Beyond King Ella, the sagas record several other notable victims of the blood eagle. King Edmund of East Anglia allegedly suffered this fate at the hands of Ivar the Boneless in 869 AD. King Halfdan of Norway was said to have been blood-eagled by rival Viking factions. Each account emphasizes not just the physical horror, but the religious significance. These weren't just executions, but sacrificial offerings to ensure divine favor. The blood eagle was never performed in private. The entire Viking community was expected to witness the sacrifice, from the highest jarls to the youngest children. This public aspect served multiple purposes. It demonstrated the chieftain's power, it honored the gods through communal participation, and it served as a warning to future enemies about the consequences of opposing Viking will. Performing the blood eagle required not just physical skill, but enormous psychological conditioning. The executioners were usually experienced warriors who had seen countless battles, yet this ritual demanded a different kind of brutality. Slow, methodical, surgical torture rather than the heat of battle violence they knew. Many accounts suggest that even hardened Viking warriors found the blood eagle deeply disturbing to perform. Different Viking groups developed their own variations of the blood eagle technique. Some would salt the wounds to extend the victim's consciousness. Others would use heated tools to cauterize blood vessels and prevent death from blood loss. The Danes allegedly had a version that could keep victims alive for an entire day, while Norwegian Vikings developed methods to ensure the lungs remained intact and functional even after extraction. From the victim's perspective, the blood eagle was a descent into unimaginable horror. Initially, there would be the shock of the first incision, followed by the rhythmic agony of each rib being broken. Then came the indescribable sensation of having internal organs manipulated and removed while remaining fully conscious. Finally, the surreal experience of seeing one's own lungs spread like wings while life slowly ebbed away. The Vikings didn't see the blood eagle as mere torture. In their worldview, it was a sacred duty commanded by their gods. They believed that the more pain they could inflict while keeping the victim alive, the more powerful the sacrifice became. The victim's suffering was literally transformed into divine currency, purchasing favor from Odin and ensuring victory in future battles. Word of the blood eagle spread terror throughout medieval Europe. Kings and warriors who heard detailed accounts of what awaited captured enemies often chose death in battle rather than risk falling into Viking hands alive. The psychological warfare aspect was as effective as the religious one. The mere threat of the blood eagle could cause enemy armies to fight with desperate fury or flee in terror. Over time, the blood eagle evolved from a rare ritual reserved for the most hated enemies into a more systematic form of execution used to demonstrate Viking power. By the 10th century, some Viking leaders were using the threat of blood eagle as a diplomatic tool, extracting tribute and submission from enemies who preferred payment to the possibility of such a fate. The blood eagle required specialized tools beyond ordinary weapons. Vikings developed specific knives for the initial incision, bone-breaking hammers designed for precision, and rib spreaders that could hold the chest cavity open without causing immediate death. These implements were often ornately decorated and considered sacred objects, passed down through generations of Viking leaders. The blood eagle wasn't performed randomly. It was often timed to coincide with major Viking religious festivals or seasonal celebrations. The spring equinox, midsummer festivals, and winter solstice were all considered auspicious times for major sacrifices. The alignment with religious calendar ensured maximum divine favor and community participation in the sacred torture. The blood eagle was primarily reserved for high-status victims, kings, jarls, and prominent warriors whose deaths would have maximum symbolic impact. Common soldiers or peasants weren't considered worthy of such an elaborate execution. The social status of the victim was crucial to the religious efficacy. The gods demanded the blood of kings, not commoners. While most associated with Norwegian and Danish Vikings, the blood eagle technique spread throughout Scandinavia and even to Viking settlements in Iceland, Ireland, and England. Each region developed its own variations, but the core elements remained consistent. Broken ribs, extracted lungs, and the symbolic arrangement resembling eagle wings. Much of what we know about the blood eagle comes from Christian chroniclers who were both horrified and fascinated by the procedure. Monks writing in scriptoriums across Europe recorded detailed accounts, often embellishing the horror to demonstrate the barbarism of pagan Vikings. Their descriptions, while biased, provide crucial historical evidence of the technique's existence and impact. Archaeological discoveries have provided some physical evidence for the blood eagle's existence. Excavations of Viking burial sites have uncovered remains showing signs of systematic rib damage consistent with the described technique. Specialized tools found in high-status Viking graves match the implements described in saga accounts of the blood eagle procedure. As Vikings gradually converted to Christianity and became more integrated into European political systems, the blood eagle began to disappear. The last recorded instances occurred in the early 11th century. As Christian influence and political necessities made such extreme torture diplomatically and religiously unacceptable. Modern forensic experts and medical professionals have analyzed the blood eagle technique to determine its physiological feasibility. Their conclusions are disturbing. Performed correctly, the procedure could indeed keep a victim conscious and alive for extended periods while inflicting maximum suffering. The Vikings had accidentally discovered one of the most medically precise torture methods in human history. Modern psychologists studying the blood eagle have attempted to understand the mindset of those who could perform such methodical torture. The combination of religious fervor, cultural conditioning, and ritualistic framework allowed otherwise normal individuals to participate in extreme cruelty they would never consider in ordinary circumstances. The power of religious belief to override natural human empathy is clearly demonstrated in these accounts. The blood eagle left a lasting impact on Scandinavian culture that persists even today. References appear in modern Nordic literature, television shows, and cultural expressions. The technique has become a symbol of the extreme violence that characterized the Viking Age, representing both the terror they inspired and the complexity of their religious worldview. When compared to other medieval torture methods, the breaking wheel, flaying, or burning alive, the blood eagle stands out for its combination of physical brutality, psychological horror, and religious significance. While other cultures developed effective torture techniques, none combined anatomical precision with spiritual symbolism quite like the Viking blood eagle. The Norse sagas provide the most detailed accounts of blood eagle executions, though scholars debate how much is historical fact versus literary embellishment. The sagas describe the procedure with clinical detail while emphasizing the religious and honor-based motivations. These literary sources remain our primary window into the Viking mindset that made such extreme torture not just acceptable, but religiously mandatory. The blood eagle significantly influenced Viking military tactics and strategy. Enemy commanders knew that capture meant possible subjection to this torture, leading to more desperate resistance and less likelihood of surrender. This actually made Viking conquests more difficult in some cases, as enemies preferred death in battle to the possibility of such a fate. The arrival of Christianity in Scandinavia spelled the end for the blood eagle and similar pagan practices. Christian concepts of mercy, forgiveness, and human dignity directly contradicted the ritualistic torture that had been central to Norse religious practice. The transformation from pagan brutality to Christian mercy represents one of the most dramatic cultural shifts in European history. Viking women played significant roles in blood eagle ceremonies, though not as executioners. They prepared ritual materials, maintained sacred fires, and led ceremonial chants during the torture. Some accounts describe volvas, female shamans, reading omens from the victim's suffering, interpreting divine messages in the patterns of blood and the victim's screams. Different blood eagle executions required different sacred locations depending on the season and religious significance. Summer ceremonies took place in sacred groves dedicated to Odin. Winter executions occurred in great halls with the entire community present, and spring rituals were performed at stone circles aligned with celestial events. The location was as important as the technique itself. The blood eagle carried enormous political weight beyond its religious significance. Performing the ritual on a captured king sent a clear message to other rulers about Viking power and determination. It was political theater designed to demonstrate that no one, regardless of status or power, was beyond Viking reach and Viking justice. The Vikings' anatomical knowledge required for the blood eagle was surprisingly sophisticated for the medieval period. They understood which blood vessels to avoid, how to maintain consciousness during organ removal, and the precise points where ribs connected to the spine. This medical knowledge was likely gained through battlefield experience and careful observation of human anatomy during countless raids and battles. In Viking culture, performing the blood eagle was sometimes a kinship obligation. Sons were expected to avenge their fathers through this ritual, brothers to honor their siblings' deaths, and clans to demonstrate their power through extreme vengeance. The failure to perform blood eagle when honor demanded it could result in social disgrace and accusations of cowardice. Blood eagle was expensive in terms of resources and opportunity cost. Keeping a high-value prisoner alive for the ritual meant foregoing immediate ransom payments. The ceremony required significant community resources, specialized tools, and days of preparation. For Vikings, the religious and political benefits were considered worth the economic sacrifice. Knowledge of the blood eagle technique was carefully preserved within Viking warrior culture through oral tradition and specialized training. Master executioners would teach the precise methodology to selected apprentices, ensuring the religious significance and technical accuracy remained intact across generations. This wasn't random violence. It was a sophisticated torture art, passed down through bloodlines of Viking leaders. Vikings believed that victims of the blood eagle could communicate with the gods during their extended suffering, serving as messengers between the mortal and divine realms. The victims' screams were interpreted as divine speech, their blood patterns read as prophetic signs, and their final moments watched for omens about future battles and harvests. The actual death in a blood eagle execution typically came from a combination of blood loss, shock, and organ failure, rather than any single traumatic injury. Victims might remain conscious until the very end, experiencing the surreal sight of their own extracted lungs while their life force slowly ebbed away. The moment of death was carefully observed for divine signs and religious significance. The blood eagle ceremony didn't end with the victim's death. The body would be left exposed for days to allow the gods to collect the sacrificed spirit, while the extracted lungs were burned in sacred fires with special incense. The victims' bones were often crafted into religious artifacts, and their blood used to consecrate weapons and ceremonial objects. Studying the blood eagle presents unique historical challenges. Most accounts come from saga literature written centuries after the alleged events. Christian chroniclers with obvious bias against pagan practices, and archaeological evidence that can only suggest rather than prove the technique's existence. Separating historical fact from literary embellishment remains an ongoing scholarly debate. Warriors and civilians who witnessed blood eagle executions carried psychological scars for life. Many accounts describe witnesses suffering nightmares, religious conversions, and lasting trauma from observing such extreme human suffering. Even in a culture that celebrated violence, the blood eagle represented a level of cruelty that challenged the psychological limits of human observers. Modern legal scholars studying the blood eagle classify it as one of history's most extreme examples of cruel and unusual punishment. The technique violates every contemporary understanding of human rights, medical ethics, and legal justice. Its study provides crucial insights into how religious belief and cultural conditioning can enable otherwise unthinkable acts of cruelty. The blood eagle has captured modern imagination through television shows, films, and literature. Though most depictions sanitize or sensationalize the actual historical reality, popular media tends to focus on the dramatic visual elements while ignoring the religious and cultural context that made such extreme torture acceptable in Viking society. Recent archaeological investigations at known Viking religious sites have uncovered evidence that supports saga accounts of blood eagle executions. Specialized tools, human remains with consistent rib damage, and ritual layouts all corroborate historical descriptions. These discoveries provide the strongest physical evidence for the blood eagle's historical reality. Studying the blood eagle requires careful balance between historical accuracy and cultural sensitivity. Modern Scandinavian scholars work to understand their ancestors' practices without glorifying or condemning them by contemporary standards. The goal is historical understanding rather than moral judgment of practices that emerged from completely different cultural and religious contexts. Some modern medical experts argue that the blood eagle as described in historical sources would be physiologically impossible to perform while keeping victims alive. They contend that the massive trauma would cause immediate death, suggesting that saga accounts may be literary exaggeration rather than historical fact. This debate continues among historians and medical professionals. The blood eagle's historical impact extends far beyond its actual practice. It influenced medieval European perceptions of Vikings, shaped religious and cultural conflicts, and demonstrated the extreme lengths to which human beings can go when religious fervor combines with cultural conditioning. The technique remains a powerful symbol of humanity's capacity for both creativity and cruelty. The blood eagle serves as a stark reminder that ordinary people can commit extraordinary cruelty when religious belief, cultural pressure, and social conditioning a line to make the unthinkable seem not just acceptable, but divinely mandated. Understanding how such extreme torture became religiously justified provides crucial insights into preventing similar atrocities in contemporary societies. The Viking blood eagle represents one of humanity's darkest innovations, a torture method so sophisticated in its cruelty that it challenges our understanding of what human beings are capable of inflicting upon each other. While we study it as historical curiosity, we must remember that behind every account was a real human being who experienced unimaginable suffering for the religious satisfaction of their captors. Today, as we reflect on this horrific chapter of human history, we're reminded that civilization's greatest achievement isn't our technology or our conquests. It's our gradual recognition that every human being deserves dignity and protection from such extreme cruelty. The blood eagle should serve not as entertainment, but as a warning about what happens when we abandon our humanity in service of ideology, revenge, or religious fervor. If this exploration of history's darkest methods has taught you something new, please subscribe for more historical investigations. And remember, the best way to honor those who suffered such fates is to ensure that such systematic cruelty never happens again.